The Bush administration is involved in another turmoil here, another scandal, because George Tenant, head of the CIA, just came out with his book, and he was on 60 Minutes recently. Did you see that program?
60 Minutes last night was great.
What did you think about that?
I thought it was amazing, and of course, television, you're trying to fill in all these blanks, but the single most important thing, and I think a lot of the blogs missed this. A lot of blogs, the writers were angry at Tenant, saying, well, you were part of the problem. It didn't have anything to do with it. What has everything to do with it is that for the first time we've got an insider coming forward saying that Bush was hot and heavy to pursue Iraq prior to 9/11. Prior to 9/11. That's the story. That everything else was just used as an excuse to go down this road. And if you think about everything that has happened in Iraq since then, the loss of stature that we've suffered in the global community as a result, the horrible, horrible suffering of our troops, the horrible suffering of those people, and the absolute inability. Bush has been the very best president ever for the Saudis. He has done absolutely everything that they have asked. But there's one thing that he did not do, and this is probably the biggest dumbass move that he possibly could have done, and it comes down to this. Everyone knew that you leave the parties in power, as many of them as possible. It's what we did to the Japanese. That's how we brought the Japanese to heel after World War II. Immediately following, we may not like the sound of this, but as soon as we conquered what was left of the German army, the Nazis were the people in power. We told them what to do. We gave them a paycheck, and they were the police department. But when Bush walks in, he wants to take the Baathists out all the way down to the school teachers. The Saudi royal family asked him not to do that. Everyone around him asked him not to do that. The single stupidest mistake, because without the Baathists, as cruel as they were, as brutal as they can be, we didn't have to keep all of the men. There are people at the top that easily could have gone. But without them, you have no sense of order. You have chaos. You have civil war. You have Iraq today. And the ones who are suffering are the American men and servicewomen, the most important lives in America today are over there, and they're suffering for absolutely no good reason. Our generals could have been plugged into their generals, making orders, giving paychecks, withholding paychecks, but instead you've got this chaos when the most valuable people in America, American military men and women, are just being asked to serve as targets.
Yeah, and the point you made about Bush having made up his mind to go to Iraq prior to 9/11, that also came out in Paul O'Neill's book, which was he was one of the very first officials to write about the administration after he left office. And he said that the first cabinet meeting he went to in January of 2000, he thought they were going to talk about policy and all kinds of things. The first item on the agenda is, how do we get rid of Saddam Hussein? And he could not believe it. He was astounded by that. And that's what they were talking about all along. And after 9/11, that just gave the Bush administration a reason to go into Iraq. By tying those together, of course, Iraq had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda, so it was a false premise from the beginning. But the other point you made, Mark, was that our conduct when we first went into Iraq is really what created the insurgency. And in the book Fiasco, I think it's Mark Rickman wrote that, he explains the mistakes that we made from day one in Iraq, and just what you said, going in and taking everybody that's high up in government, that knows how to run industry, that knows how to run the country, we fired them. Can you imagine what would happen in this country? And then we took 500,000 soldiers who had been in Saddam's army, and we fired them. So you got 500,000 unemployed people now who are all pissed off and have guns. And that's how you created insurgency.
Those are the militias, by the way. The Baathists have the same organization, but now it's outside of anyone's control. Right. That is the basis.
And then it was just one mistake after another after that, and we find ourselves in our present situation where nobody knows what the hell to do. You know, if we leave, it's going to be chaos, and a lot of innocent people are going to die. If we stay, it's chaos, and a lot of innocent people are going to die. So it's a horrible situation that we've gotten into because of the lack of leadership from the beginning.
And now you can see how smart Bush Sr. was in pulling up and never going into Baghdad. What did he do? He humiliated Saddam. He cornered Saddam. Saddam couldn't fly an airplane. Saddam couldn't come with artillery. He couldn't amass troops in any part. He was a zero threat. Under Clinton, the exact same thing happened. If they even turned on the radar, that piece of armament was destroyed. We had complete containment. So the notion that Saddam was somehow a threat to anybody is just absolutely ridiculous. And George Bush Sr. had a whole lot to do with making sure that Saddam had absolutely no wiggle room and couldn't harm anyone in the region. And instead, we still went in under this goofball.
And you have to wonder why, in light of that, we went after Iraq. I mean, Iraq was contained. It had nothing to do with 9/11. And I really think talking about George Bush Sr. is the answer to that. I think Jr. was maybe embarrassed that his father didn't follow through, didn't totally conquer the enemy, you know, and his macho image was affected by that. He listened to a few other people who happened to agree with him. And I mean, one of his big problems is he only listens to people who agree with him. And that's who he surrounds himself with, is yes men. He doesn't listen to anyone with an opposite point of view. And so these false beliefs just get reinforced and reinforced until they convince themselves that they're heading in the right direction. And that's what happened to us in Iraq. He made up his mind from the beginning, looked for any reason to justify this, even if there wasn't sufficient evidence to support those reasons, and went ahead because he had his mind made up from the beginning. That's what he wanted to do.